Hans, thanks very much, and thank you for inviting me to speak. It's a very prestigious honour, and I'm delighted there's so much interest in what we're doing here in Ireland, and hopefully you can learn something from what I'm going to present today. And thanks so much for a lot of my Irish colleagues for logging in, and hopefully again I can add to something to your plans and your energy management plans. So my name is Alan Ryan. I'm the Programme Manager, Public Sector Programme Manager in the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. We're a government agency. I've been in this job a while, and I work very closely with 350 public bodies and about 4,000 schools in trying to meet a national 33% energy efficiency reduction target by 2020. So I'm going to give you a flavour of what's involved. There's a lot happening, and I have a lot of slides. A lot of them are for information only, and I will go through them pretty quickly, and some of them I will dwell on. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the policy context of what's driving this within Ireland, talk specifically then about the public sector programme and the supports within that, how that's leading towards a public sector project pipeline and how we're supporting more projects to come from the public sector, more about the monitoring reporting system, which is the data system. Half the presentation will be about that. I'll talk about the basic concepts and what we get about the annual reporting cycle, what data comes out of the system every year, future plans we have for the system, and then work we're doing on 2030 target, which is exciting a lot of people because of the 2030 work within the EU. So to kick on, the first slide I have here is just showing, and I'll click it through, so apologies, there's a lot of transition on this, is an overview of the policy context in Ireland. Some of it hasn't come through on the particular slide, and apologies for that. I don't know what's happening here. Hold on. Okay, I can talk it through. The policy wheel just shows that there's a lot of legislation within Ireland that's driven by the Energy Efficiency Directive and driven by the other renewable energy directives, specific legislation calling on public bodies to report annually their energy consumption, to do energy management plans, to do green public procurement, links into the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. They have requirements to report annually on specific buildings and their consumption with a display energy certificate. And then there's a national energy efficiency strategy for the public sector. And just recently, current talks are in regard to a national all-of-government plan for climate change, of which the public sector will have a strong position within. There'll be a specific chapter. So there's very strong support and policy support from government towards the Irish public sector. So the two key documents really are the two key approaches are on the left there. You'll see the monitoring reporting system. Public bodies have to report, and this is a key driver in both tracking the 33% target for each individual public body, but also it's become common language now amongst the public sector, the 33% from chief executives to government policymakers of how we're going to achieve our 33% target by 2020. And then the other key document is led by our ministry. They developed the Public Sector Energy Efficiency Strategy, which puts in place a governance structure, leadership structure for achieving the target. Just to talk a little bit more about the strategy and the governance structure, there's energy performance officers appointed and required to be appointed in all 350 public bodies, more importantly in the 17 government ministries, so Department of Agriculture, Department of Transport, etc. And there's structures in place to liaise with the government departments, especially the government energy performance officers, which is at the second highest level within that Assistant Secretary General level within each ministry, and they are responsible for themselves and their aegis public bodies for achieving the national 33% target. And then the energy performance officers are responsible for each public body, and they should be at director level. So the governance structure is very important and has been resulting in a lot of development and helping the project pipeline. this slide just shows the different public bodies, the different ministries, from agriculture right up to transport, their percentage consumption within the public sector, and their current status of where they are as an aegis group. And you can see how many public bodies report into each department and the size of the department, so we can see which departments are use a lot of energy with their aegis groups. So that's just a little bit of the policy context, that there's a strong governance structure there, and there's a strong target. I'm going to talk a good bit now about the actual public sector programme and what supports we offer to public bodies. They're based around the tenets that it really depends on where you're starting from. Some public bodies start from a very basic perspective, some are very, very advanced and considering 2030, 2050 horizons. Some just don't know how much energy you're using. So we have a support manual for public bodies of all the different supports, and it grows and changes every year. So it starts with getting started for those who are getting new to this, and that can be new people within organizations doing a lot, getting organized, and getting strategic. So getting started, we start with just basic networking, events, training, and we have a specific calendar for that. Getting organized is about energy management, and we have training programs. It's a key principle, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Getting strategic then is linking in with the leadership within and the energy performance officer within public bodies to really drive energy management projects and performance improvement. And we've specific supports for developing projects, and then we have the monitoring reporting system, which I'll talk about at the end. So just to go into them in a little bit of detail, as I was saying, the key starting point for every public body is to join our network, our online network. It's called EnergyLink. It's for public bodies only. There's 1,800 members on it at the moment, and they share information. So it's a key platform for us to make people aware of what's going on. So for example, for this webinar, we would have posted on the EnergyLink network lots of any events, or if people want to engage the public sector at all, it's a good way of engaging with them. And then they share best practices and approaches and questions, common questions. That's the starting point. Everybody can avail of that service. We have an annual calendar. You can't read it there very specifically, but there's an annual calendar that we form in the year previous, and it's launched in January of this year, and it plans out all the best practice events that we're going to run throughout the year, from transport event to one-day events, all the project-specific courses. We call these accelerator programs, where it's not just a one-day event. You commit to doing something, and we'll give you 1 to 3 days training with mentoring and dedicated supports in between. They're all listed ahead of time, so you can avail of them. And then all the specific training, dedicated training courses. We run training courses on measurement and verification, on energy auditing, certified energy manager, etc. And then the key dates within the year, especially for monitoring, reporting, compliance. So we try and map out as much time ahead of time of what public body specific interests are and what they want to talk about. And a lot of it's just basically keeping people informed of what's going on. Some training examples. We run an energy awareness training program every year. It's a 3-day program, and every year people come back and showcase what they've done, and we try and learn as to what is best practices for energy awareness promotion. We have specific programs that arise due to needs. So NZEB is a very popular topic, and we run specific sessions on these sort of topics. And then if there's specific training needs in the sector, we'll run that. So over the last 2 to 3 years, we've been running a lot of public lighting training courses, gearing up towards national public lighting projects. So it's busy just keeping people abreast of what's going on and kept informed. And it's driven by people wanting to know and wanting to learn. Every year we run a public sector conference. It happened in January, just passed. 600 people attended the 3rd conference just there recently. The sectors meet, so health, local authorities, third level, they'll break into their sectors and they'll share amongst themselves. And then there's project action sessions in the afternoon on particular topics like transport, energy performance contracting, etc. So it's a great day to network and meet people and just show the leadership and passion there is within the Irish public sector to make change and do things. A key principle, and I hope this graph works, a key principle that we base all our supports on is energy management. We're trying to embed energy management in every organization. It's like teaching a person how to fish as opposed to giving them fish. So it's not just give people money and give them support. It's try to embed the principles within the public bodies that they can find, act, plan, and improve their performance themselves. So energy management is the key, and without energy management, there's an ad hoc approach. Some people see they do an audit, and they'll act on the audit, and then it'll go away, people change, etc. It's only when we have energy management practices in place that we can begin to really target our 33% target. So we really do push energy management on public bodies, and by and large, public bodies get it and build capacity and resources. In terms of impact, it's one of the biggest impact supports we run is energy management training. We have a different approach depending on your size and scale and your ability. There is an energy management approach for you, from very basic energy management for schools and small public bodies, right up to very large organizations who should be encouraged to use the ISO 50001. We have a SEAI bespoke product called Energy Map Management Action Program, which we developed, which is more towards the small to medium user. All the principles of energy management are the same. It's just they get more detailed the further up the chain you get. And we run these supports and this same approach to non-public bodies, to large users, to SMEs, etc. So Energy Map is based on 50001, but it's a more basic form of energy management. To date, we've trained over 500 people, it could be 600 by now, and the average savings, as I'm saying, that the biggest impact is about 5 to 10% savings from just doing basic good energy management, putting a team in place, getting the basics done right. And then those that are ready, then we encourage them to go for 50001, and this year we have up to 30 public bodies entered the program. 18 are currently certified, with 12 yet to become certified. And then overall, there's some public bodies that got certified outside the program. So these are the leaders in energy management in the public sector, and you can see the benefits for people transition within the public sector. The energy management gains are held within those companies. They have leadership, they have teams in place. It's working very well. So the next level up then is getting strategic. We want them to get really specific on their energy management. We tailor energy management supports for them, tailor delivery of energy map training or ISO 50001, bespoke training, access to energy efficiency design for their new buildings and their new facilities, really tackling energy efficiency in new builds, and then long-term energy strategies, help in building a project pipeline, which I'll talk more about later. Starts with helping them with some energy assessments, helping to find out where the opportunities are, planning where the best benefit bang for buck there is within their energy projects, and then a mixture of project supports and capital supports. And then lastly, the monitoring and reporting system. And we do that both at individual public bodies and then at sectoral level. And you see here a plan here for tackling the charitable sector of a mini bureau, where we aggregate and we try and support them as a sector better. So some of the very large energy users will support one-to-one, and the rest will support on a sectoral basis, trying to advance the practices within the organizations. We have the similar approach for schools. It's called Energy and Education. It's a very specific program tailored for schools, and it has a very high success rate. 700 schools have been trained in it so far, and over €1 million has been shown to be saved just by basically training them in energy management and simple assessments. So some discussions on the project pipeline, and this is something that came about from the project, from the energy efficiency strategy, and we're beginning to articulate what that means. At a basic level, we encourage everybody to get started. Do your energy management. Get organized and get strategic. Don't just go straight delving into projects because you run out of steam, you run out of money. We really need to embed a long-term approach. But then there are specific general grant programs for public bodies that they can always avail of. And then we'll talk a little bit about a specific program for public bodies. And then there are other schemes. There are other schemes. The Climate Action Fund, direct by government, has gave out 72 million last year, and there are other capital schemes. So there's plenty, there is money, and what we're trying to encourage public bodies is to work from the bottom and build business cases. We have this concept called project accelerators, where public bodies who are doing projects and want to get on with it. There's lots of lighting projects, so why don't we meet? We run 3 sessions a year. We commonize, or we standardize the approach. We give you standard specs for lighting, and we help you procure, give you expert advice on best practice lighting schemes, all the way up to trying to help you avail of grants. So if you have particular projects in particular areas, we just want to get on with it, get the projects done. There's specific supports for that called project accelerators. We have project assistance grants akin to technical assistance. There's different amounts of money depending on how deep you're going with the project, the size of the project, and whether you're doing energy performance contracting or not. I won't talk a lot about that, just to say that it's a devolved support. We give you the money, you go away and do the project, and we don't really interact. Whilst the more refined approach that's coming up is a deeper engagement with public bodies. There's lots of SEAI has lots of grants. I'm not going to talk about them in detail here, but there is lots of grants. Sometimes it's hard to understand which grant to go for. There's grants for communities. This one is aimed at energy efficiency design of new facilities. This one's aimed at biomass and renewable heat promotion and RD&D. So there's lots of capital grants, and for people it can be just so through the partnership approach is to try and find out which one is most applicable to them. The energy efficiency obligation scheme, so this is a scheme across every country in Europe. Energy suppliers can help public bodies and businesses make savings. So a lot of public bodies are also availing of the supports under this scheme also. So the project pipeline was promoted in the energy efficiency strategy for the public sector. There's 800 million identified in the National Development Plan from 2023 onwards. And what we're trying to do is move from people doing energy management and availing of the low-hanging fruit and the quick wins to start doing bigger projects. And we need to identify, well, what are those big projects? What is possible? What is feasible? So last year we provided a lot of support to try and inquire as to what that would be, with the mission of informing government as to what is needed, what investment is needed, where is the investment needed, and then begin to develop the capacity in those sectors to do business cases, look at larger scale projects. There's lots of ELENA, Horizon 2020 supports. How do we avail of all those supports to draw down and develop national projects? We did this through what we call a gap to target tool. So if you take the data the public bodies report every year, we look at scenarios out to 2020, and some people are looking at to 2030. You enter into projects you use to close this gap or what you think you can close the gap, and then you're either going to reach the target or you're not. So it's a bit of a reality check. I either need to do deeper or more projects, or I need to do more audits, etc. But it's a first step to try and really understand what is the potential for the public sector to save. We got them to classify the projects from, it's just a small project right up to it's a national infrastructure project or it's a new build project. So, when you talk energy efficiency projects, it's not just about retrofit. There's energy efficiency included in a lot of things. Project readiness then is, well, how ready are you to do the project? Is it an idea, or are you just you're tendering it, you're procuring it, so you have the money and you're getting on with it? And then how ready are you, able are you to deliver the project? You know, I'm a small public body, I can't really deliver it myself. Right up to I deliver lots of projects every year, so it's just basically to understand how ready public bodies are to invest in projects. We've done analysis of what's coming out of this project pipeline, of this analysis. So these projects here are obviously conceptual, from retrofit projects right up to new build and new investment. And these are the ones that are big projects that are happening, they're being procured, and these ones, are just about to get started. So it gives us, from a government perspective, it allows us to see where the projects are going to be. And then we begin to see where the most support will help those projects arise. So we want to, the projects down at this end, we want to make sure that they get started and moved along. So we need to help them develop their projects first. These ones need money, and these ones need political support because they're bigger projects. And there are specific grant programs then that will be aimed at this particular cohort, bigger money grants aimed at this particular cohort, and then their own money as well, bringing to bear. So it gives a good feel of where the projects might arise. And that then gives us a flavour of what projects are potential. So from 110 public bodies reported back last year, 65% of the total energy consumption, and showed 662 projects and about 660 million of worth of investment. So we'll begin to refine that every year and understand where the potential lies and begin to support it. How we're doing that over the last year or two is through a new way of moving money. So they'll have the standard grants, and now we have a pot of money given to us by our ministry dedicated to moving this project pipeline. And it's trying to develop large-scale project development, either aimed at particular sectors, helping sectors move forward as a sector, or directly to very large energy users. And it's about building capacity, putting the resources in there to articulate the projects and get them moving and do the business cases. And then the resources, and then some capital money to pilot projects, so to actually install and test new technologies, new delivery models, new resource models, new contracting models, well, energy performance contracting work, for example. So it begins to prime the pump within the sector. So we spend so much to try and demonstrate how we can spend multiples of that. What is the leadership, governance, and financial instruments? What role can EPC play? You know, it begins to create the right governance structures for projects to happen and demonstrates best practices and technologies. Ultimately, we're aiming for large-scale project development here. We did a lot of work in schools over the last 3 years, over 15 million invested there across about 30-something schools. There's 4,000 schools, so this model will help demonstrate to the Department of Education what's needed to retrofit 3,000 plus schools and how that will link to the National Development Plan, how we'll deliver on that level of investment. There's been a central government retrofit pilot for central government buildings delivered through the Office of Public Works, and they've done a lot of projects over the last couple of years and showing huge savings in particular areas. And again, the practical limitations of trying to retrofit buildings that are occupied, specifications for standard technologies, these can all be applied across buildings in all of the public sector, and really beginning to learn of how we mobilize for bigger projects. And then there's money that we're given specifically to the energy management activity. Here's something that we gave directly to one of our biggest energy users in the country, the health executive, to help with develop an energy management bureau. So resources to go around, do the audits, get the low-hanging fruit, measure performance, and begin to work with other programs like the Optimising Power at Work scheme within the OPW metering. But ultimately begin the next phase of that will begin to try and test pilots and pilot how we can replicate projects across the HSE. So for example, if we retrofit one building and there's 300 like this, well, what do we learn from that to be able to go away now and get the money and resources to be able to retrofit those 300 buildings. So that's the project pipeline. It's a bit of a whistle-stop tour to it, but it just goes to show you what, with a little bit of data and a ground-up approach, you can really begin to plan this action, and it's very much linked to our Department of Public Expenditure and Reform, who've basically said to us, come to us with the business cases and then we will talk. There's money allocated in the National Development Plan. We're open to looking at financial instruments, but we want to see the projects. We want to see the evidence base that there's going to be a return. So that's what we're working at through that. A little bit then about the monitoring and reporting scheme. So every year public bodies have to report. I have a good few slides within this, and I'll tip through them at a rapid enough pace. It's just to give you a flavour of what public bodies report every year and how it works. So the M&R system started almost 10 years ago now, and it took a while with pilots and consultations with public bodies of how we were going to track the 33% target, the methodology for it, etc. We started off with a small amount of public bodies piloting it and a small amount of meters on the system, and we're now up to nearly 50,000 meters on the system, nearly full compliance from public bodies in reporting, and nearly 63% compliance from schools. So it's taken a while to get up and moving, but we're now on our 5th annual report. So we've a lot of good data from public bodies, and public bodies are excellent in that, their level of reporting and how seriously they take it. So every year, so once off, public bodies have to report a baseline. So from every year they start reporting, they'll report a baseline. There's 3 baselines available for them to select. And then every year in a 6-month window, they've a certain amount of data to enter into the system. Starting in December, they enter in their meters in by January. We go and get the meter data for electricity and gas. It's back into the system, and then they can see all their consumption, and they can have a scorecard by the end of the year. So they enter in consumption every year. They enter in an activity metric, which I'll start about now in a minute. We validate that data through a process, which I'll also talk about, and then public bodies get a scorecard, which is sent to their CEOs and sent to government, and is the basis of that accountability you heard earlier on. That's the basics of the system, and there's lots of supports for public bodies. There's a dedicated help desk where people can ring and ask questions. They get a lot of support through their partnership. There's annual training every year for new users and more advanced users, and we run a lot of sectoral-based training for schools, for local authorities, on how really to bespoke the system for their needs. So I'll just give you a flavour of what public bodies have to enter into the system every year. So shown in the middle there is the public sector M&R system. It's an online system. Public bodies are given a specific organisational account. So they report as an organisation, they don't report as an individual site. So for the health service executive that has 3,000 buildings, one person reports on behalf of the whole public body. So the first thing they do is they enter in their MPRNs and GPRNs. So if they enter in the numbers, we can go and get the consumption from the meter operator. They have to enter some basic information about that meter every year, or sorry, once off, and then every year they need to validate the meter. So they give us permission to say this meter is still valid, and you have my permission to go and get the data, and then we can go get the data off the meter operator. So that's an exercise that happens in January every year. Then there's other organisation level data. So there's one number for oil, one number for solid fuels, one number for transport, etc. that goes into the system. We can't get that data. They need to report that themselves. Then they need to enter in an activity metric. So what drives consumption in your organisation? And this can be very nuanced and very specific for every public body. We'll talk a tiny bit about it. And those that are more advanced in the system are really beginning to look at what drives their energy usage, and there's ways of bespoking this within the system, and there's some typical basis there for an activity metric listed there. They have to list in their projects and, that they've implemented every year, their planned projects, and their energy management status, and contact information, etc. So then we take the meter data that they've entered in, or the meter numbers. We send that on to the meter operators for electricity and for gas, and they give us back, over about a 6 to 2 month period, they give us back that data for the public bodies, and it's pre-populated then on the system. Public bodies then, that's added with the general organization data, oil, etc., and the activity metric data, and a scorecard is then generated for a public body every year, and then that's what we use for the accountability system, etc. So that's it in a nutshell. I've included this because I think people might be interested in it as what level of data is included and what's the scope of the data included. There's a lot in this, but I'm just going to, you'll have the slides for yourselves to understand it a bit more, and there's more included on the web. So all energy types are included. So everything from electricity to coal, peat, petrol, transport fuels, etc. It's all included. All energy use is included, and this is another important principle. So buildings, utilities, transport, mobile plant, accommodation, your data centers. We even ask them to report emissions trading facilities because it's an energy efficiency target. It's not a carbon target at the moment. CHP, everything. So there's a wide scope of what energy is included. Obviously, there's certain energy that's not included. So social housing, because it's personal data. Construction projects, some things that are maybe just hard to get and hard to measure on an ongoing basis, staff mileage, etc. An important principle of the system is you cannot outsource your energy consumption. So if you collected waste one year and then you outsource it, you still need to report the energy consumption associated with that service. So it's the energy associated with you providing the service as a public body. You need to include it all. So it's less important about who owns the bill or who's paying the bill. It's more about who the energy should be attributable to the organization. And again, that means you need to go out and get energy on specific stuff. If you're doing a lot of leased buildings, if you're leasing a lot of equipment, if you have PPPs, if you outsource a lot of stuff, you're going to have to begin to measure the energy consumption associated with them. And again, there's some exceptions with that. And then you have to self-report certain energy types. So it's not coming up for me there. Okay, it didn't come up. So you need to self-report particular energy types. So if you do a lot of electric vehicle charging, if you're doing a lot of electricity generation, there's specific rules around that and how the electricity is accounted for and how the energy is accounted for within that. Sure, there's lots of nuances as to what you need to report separately. The system does, I don't know if this is going to show, if it hasn't showed previously, the system does a number of calculations every year. The first one it does is it converts everything that's put into the system, whatever units it puts into the system, it converts them all to kilowatt hours. The second thing it does is it adjusts some adjustments for weather. So obviously the thermal consumption is adjusted for weather to ease out and smooth out any issues there regarding excessive weather events, which we had back in 2011, I think it is, or 2010. We had the whole country was covered in ice. So we smoothed those out so that the public body doesn't get a big bang or a big hit in any particular year. And then, of course, we convert everything then to primary energy. And this has a big effect on the energy efficiency metrics because Ireland's primary energy factor, that's the amount of primary energy, total primary energy needed to provide final energy. The factor for electricity is very strong, but it's falling every year. So there is a benefit by tracking on public primary energy, but then in some years there can be an increase. But overall, it's down over the prevailing period of since when we started doing baseline. And if you're able to do a baseline right back to 2001, then you get the full benefit of the primary energy factor. And then there's projections out that we use for the gap to target tool that public bodies can use to project forward as to how much their gap to target will be, and these are based on policy objectives being met. And then we also convert the fossil fuels to primary energy. On-site generation then we do as a one-to-one basis. So there's a benefit for on-site generation of renewable electricity. So if you do photovoltaic or if you do on-site generation, that's factored within the system, and because of the primary energy factor, instead of importing energy at a primary energy factor of 2.1 or 2.2, so 1 unit is actually 2.2 units of primary energy. The system records, if you generate it on site, it records it as 1. You use a factor of 1. So there's a better benefit for that. So what makes a good activity metric? There's lots of information there on that. So some people use meters squared, some people use employees, some people use their service level, some people use number of students or number of people served, or population served, for charitable sector and health sector, number of beds. So there's lots of different ways. Transport use kilometers or personals traveled. The system asks you for your total useful floor area and your full-time equivalents anyway. But a lot of public bodies are on the route of composite metrics, which tries to factor in the weighting for particular activities. And there's the sums, if anybody is interested in the specific sums of how we track against the 33%. So public bodies can change their baseline or activity metric or their historical data, but they have to be able to go back to their baseline with it, and it's subject to what we call a data verification assessment. So at any stage, we can go in and check the data and do different levels of deep, from light to deep analysis of the data every year. And this year we selected 100 public bodies for checking their data. So that assures that data is robust, and people there's a lot of activity every year trying to keep the data right. So I noticed, sorry, I'm running out of time here a little bit. I'm going to flash through these just to show you the type of data that's coming out of the system. So 96% compliance of public bodies, and 94% of public bodies reported. You can see that these are some of the things taken from the annual report. We have, electricity is one of the biggest users, thermal and transport, and then there's a high Pareto effect. The top 10 public bodies use 50% of energy consumption. The top 50 use 80%. So we really need to be, if those large energy users don't meet the target, then the public sector doesn't meet the target. Lots of information here as to the different sectors, their consumption, what they consume, the breakdown of the energy spend, who are the biggest sectors and what type of fuels are they using. So there's lots of information we get from that. This is an interesting one. Most public bodies are on are in a positive, as in they're making savings, and then a small number are deteriorating. Their energy performance is deteriorated. So that means their deterioration is taking away from the average savings for the sector. These are the savings for the sector as a whole. They've been growing over time. This is the target. So we've 2 years to achieve this gap here. And here's the performance of particular sectors, so we can use that for our sectoral discussions. Public bodies are doing a lot. There's a lot happening. We give samples of the projects that are happening and the samples of who's making all the savings. We break them down as here's the top 35, so here's the biggest public bodies. 34 of them account for 72%. The next 123 account for 22%, and the next 174 account for 2%. It gets a bit of press every year. This really motivates people. They don't want to be seen to be not performing. Some papers take a negative stance and some take a very positive stance. But it does get coverage every year, and it's a lot of interest in it. A lot of data available from the system. I put these up here so you can see them. The system you can go in and search per public body and see an energy statement per public body and see what they're using, how much electricity, gas, etc. they're using, their progress towards the target. So a lot of information there. There's their scorecard. This is their actual annual scorecard that is sent to CEOs and sent to public bodies every year. This public body is broadly on target towards the 33% over here. There's lots of public-facing data on the system, trends, graphs, etc. that people can look at. Project-level data, you can go in and enter projects and see what projects are happening in the public sector. Here's one on electric vehicles, and then you can export it and have a look at it separately to the system. There's sectoral-based reports on the website. Here's the link to where you can look at different sectors. And then here's one for local authorities, broken down of where the biggest users are. And interesting here, linking back to the project pipeline, public lighting is 64% of local authorities' consumption. And there's a planned national public lighting project which will deliver 202 gigawatt hours. And if it's delivered, it will bring the sector efficiency from 23% to 38%. So that's the power of kind of really targeting your investments and your resources. And you can benchmark yourself against other public bodies. Here's our consumption. Here's our public body, SEAI, where it lies with other public body performance within our sector. I'm flashing through these very quickly. Here's a public body that took the data down from a CSV file and through one of our consultants helped model where all their biggest users and did a Pareto analysis which helped them understand where their biggest impacts were, managing all their meters and understanding where the biggest amount of consumption was. Then from the meter data that we get from the electricity supplier, we get more data from the electricity supplier. Our advisor was able to map out using heating degree day, a regression analysis to see if there was a correlation between that and the weather. So this is just from data that's in the system. This is without specific site data, and there's lots of other data on the system that people can use. We've lots of different projects planned on the system, and we plan them around 4 concepts. Tracking progress. So obviously we need to track the main reason for the system is tracking progress and compliance. We want robust data. We want to help public bodies do better energy management, to be able to use the data to make choices that save energy. And we want to make sure that the reporting burden is less every year. We have a users group to consult, and we consult regularly with sectors and public bodies on the system. And going forward, we've very specific projects. I suppose the main thing that's coming down the line is 2020 will be upon us in 2 years. So we're doing a lot of work on modelling what could be a 2030 target. And I'll talk a tiny bit about that in a minute. There's lots of, we're trying to get more granular information in the system, so that would really enhance the energy management functionality. Key to that is we're looking at allowing public bodies to form assets on the system. So you bring an MPRN, a GPRN together, and you call that building A, and then you're able to import the energy data associated with that. That will link towards, hopefully, asset performance, benchmarking of those assets, and we're looking at how that would happen. There's an obligation on public bodies to benchmark their assets every year through what's called a display energy certificate for certain buildings. Can we integrate with that? So we're doing advanced work on that. But the key to all this will be trying to get more data into it, and we're doing some tests with meter operators, suppliers, and actually trying to import public bodies meter data specifically. Quick example of that I have, here's something where a couple of meters were put in within a supplier's office, and they're feeding them into the system. These are the type of graphs that can be easily generated within the system. So we're in the early stages of mapping that out of how that could work and the added value, and about to go out to consult with public bodies on that very soon. And lastly, just a quick slide on what we're doing on the modelling towards the 2030 target. And this is information we're providing to our department to be able to make a decision. So the red line here is the current trajectory of the CO, so this is CO2 emissions. So this is the CO2 emissions of the public sector from the baseline of about 2009, and it's gone up and down a little bit, but broadly it's down about 13% to the current period. Here's where we're mapping forward. We predict we will get to the 33%. Here's what 33% looks like by 2020. If public bodies had continued on their energy efficiency levels in 2009 and they hadn't taken all the actions they had and hadn't done all the energy management activity, this is where our CO2 emissions would be based on the activity, energy per activity metrics back here in 2009. If we hadn't made all these improvements, we'd be up here. And this is where we are at the moment. So overall, we're down 30%, which is good. If we meet our 2020 targets, we'll be down this amount of carbon by 2020. So these are all the different scenarios we've mapped out. So these are ones if we just maintain a 33% energy efficiency target, and there's different scenarios within that, will lie around here. So this is just keep going at 33% to 2030. If we set a 2050 a 50% target by 2030, we'll be down around here. We'll achieve here, and then if we do different energy efficiency targets at different levels, we'll be down and around here. So this is powerful for government to be able to decide what target to set, and it'll be a key thing in the all-of-government plan. This line here is interesting. This line here is a trajectory to 2050. So if the public sector wants to be carbon neutral, which is a government plan, by 2050, so that's assumed the whole economy will be carbon neutral by 2050, we need to be on this trajectory. So if you're looking at these scenarios, you would say to yourself, well, which one would keep me on that trajectory? If I go here, then that's a lot more work to try and get me back on trajectory. So it's very informative for us to be able to inform government as to what the target will be or should be for public bodies by 2030. And then that's it in a nutshell, really. I've gone over a little bit there, sorry, but still plenty of time for questions. I covered the policy context, a little bit with the public sector program, a lot of work on trying to help the project pipeline get started and moving. And the core to it all really is good data, and that we have good organisation data, and the drive will be towards more specific data at asset level going forward. So I hope you enjoyed that, and please ask your questions.